Every 2 years, Japan loses 1 million people without a war, a pandemic, or a disaster. China's population is on track to be cut in half within a single lifetime. In Italy, the average person is already approaching 50. This isn't a local crisis. It's happening everywhere. Birth rates across the world are collapsing. So the obvious question is, are humans slowly disappearing? And if not, why does this still matter so much? For almost all of human history, population growth was painfully slow. Disease, famine, and violence kept our numbers in check. Then everything changed. The Industrial Revolution triggered exponential progress and exponential growth. Humanity surged to 6 billion people in 1999, then hit 8 billion just 24 years later. And global population will keep rising for decades. But this headline hides a deeper truth. People have quietly stopped having children. To keep a population stable, each couple needs to have about 2 children. More than that, and the population grows. Less than that, and it shrinks. Far less, and it collapses. South Korea shows what that looks like. It's a global cultural powerhouse, exporting music, movies, and technology. But in 2022, its fertility rate fell to just 0.8 children per woman, the lowest ever recorded. That means 100 young South Koreans today will have only 40 children. Those 40 will have 16. Those 16 will have just 6. If nothing changes, within a century, South Korea will have lost 94% of its young population. Not slowly, but suddenly. And while that sounds like extinction, it isn't. In raw numbers, the population simply rewinds. South Korea had 20 million people in 1950. Today, it has more than 50 million. By 2100, it's expected to fall back to around 24 million. The real danger isn't fewer people. It's who is left. In 1950, South Korea's median age was 18. Today, it's 45. By the end of the century, it will be close to 60, a society of seniors. And this pattern is repeating worldwide. China may be facing the fastest population reversal in history. As living standards rose and families moved to cities, people chose to have fewer children. Combined with decades of strict birth limits, fertility fell and stayed low. At today's rate, every 100 young Chinese will turn into just 20 within 4 generations. China now has one of the lowest fertility rates in East Asia, even lower than Japan. Europe's decline has been slower, mostly because of immigration. But immigration doesn't fix the underlying problem. Migrant fertility converges with local birth rates within a few generations. And many migrants now come from countries where birth rates are also falling. In Eastern Europe, population loss is even faster as young people move west in search of opportunity. Germany, one of the main destinations, already has one of the oldest populations on Earth. Latin America fell below replacement fertility in 2015. In the United States, population growth now depends almost entirely on immigration. There are still regions where fertility remains high, parts of the Middle East, North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa. For years, this sparked fears of overpopulation, but history suggests otherwise. The UN has recently slashed its projections for Africa's population growth. Nigeria alone is now expected to have nearly 200 million fewer people by 2100 than previously thought. As countries develop, fertility is falling faster than anyone expected. By the end of this century, most of the world may be below replacement fertility. So why does this matter? Because societies only function when enough people are in their productive years. Young and middle-aged adults do most of the work, generate wealth, and pay for public services. Older populations don't just work less, they cost more. Healthcare spending rises sharply with age. In the past, many young workers supported a small elderly population. Now imagine the opposite. A society where most people are over 60, the economic pressure becomes enormous. People work longer. Healthcare systems strain. Governments collect less money while spending more. Even rich countries struggle. Technology can help, but it can't replace an entire generation. We're already seeing this. In China, many provincial pension systems are running deficits. The country aged before it became wealthy, and now it's paying the price. By 2050, China's working-age population will shrink by roughly 200 million people, the equivalent of losing the entire U.S. workforce. Population decline also breaks infrastructure. Roads, power grids, hospitals, and transit systems are built for scale. When people leave, the cost per person explodes. Eventually, systems fail. You can see this in depopulated towns across eastern Germany, or in rural Japan where villages are slowly disappearing. So wouldn't fewer people mean more space, lower costs, and better lives? No. Prosperity isn't created by empty land or unused resources. It's created by people, their ideas, labor, and innovation. There's another risk, too: political stagnation. Aging societies tend to prioritize stability over change, preserving wealth over investing in the future. That's dangerous in a century defined by climate change, technological disruption, and global competition. Some argue that fewer humans would be good for the planet. But even if that's true, this demographic shift is far too slow to help. The world population will keep growing for decades. Climate change has to be solved long before population decline matters. So what can be done? Immigration seems like the obvious answer, and economically it helps, but it's not a permanent fix. Birth rates fall everywhere. To maintain populations through migration alone would require a constant global imbalance, which isn't sustainable or ethical. By the end of the century, Africa may hold the world's largest pool of young people. Aging nations could find themselves competing for workers rather than rejecting them. Immigration also creates social tension, something every society has struggled with throughout history. Ignoring those tensions only fuels division and extremism. Still, countries built on openness and opportunity, like the United States, may be better positioned than most, especially if they attract ambitious, skilled migrants. So how should we really think about falling birth rates? One perspective is that this is a side effect of success. The world is safer, richer, and freer than ever before, especially for women. But when people have more choices, they often choose smaller families. Here's the paradox: people want more children than they're having. In Europe, women on average say they want more than 2, yet reality falls far short. Why? Because the structures that once supported families are gone. Extended families, close communities, shared childcare, replaced by isolation, cost, and pressure. Modern parents are expected to do everything: build careers, raise children, never fall behind. Women are squeezed between incompatible expectations. Men take on more caregiving, but are still judged as providers. In most families, at least one career stalls. The modern gender pay gap is largely a motherhood penalty. Add to that a culture of individualism, travel, freedom, self-fulfillment, and people delay commitment or opt out entirely. And that's a legitimate choice. No one owes their country children. So far, no government has discovered a reliable way to reverse this trend. But some things clearly help. Affordable childcare, stable housing, financial support, and workplaces that don't punish parenthood. Having children shouldn't feel like an act of self-sabotage. And maybe change also starts with attitude. The next time you hear a crying baby in public, remember that child is part of the future keeping this whole system alive. Humanity isn't going extinct, but the shape of our societies is changing fast, and how we respond will define the next century. We've solved enormous problems before. This one won't be easy, but it's far from impossible.